We are back for another episode of Gatehouse Insights. In this episode, I am joined by Lior. We will be diving deeper into the topics of the medicinal cannabis space in Australia and the differences and experiences gained between working for a big in-house legal team for a well-known company compared to working as a sole lawyer for a startup company. Make sure you subscribe to the Gatehouse Legal Recruitment YouTube channel to catch it all. So tell me more about the medicinal cannabis space in Australia.
Sure. Medicinal cannabis was legalised by the federal government in late 2016. So what the federal government did is they instituted a framework for companies or individuals to be licensed and to cultivate, manufacture or research medicinal cannabis. That framework is really quite comprehensive. There's a licensing regime and a permitting regime, and there are a number of state and regulatory bodies that need to work together in order to get medicinal cannabis products from the manufacturers to the patients. So, you know, it's only been legal in Australia for a relatively short period of time. I think there are approximately 6,000 patients who are accessing medicinal cannabis products legally, which is a pretty small amount. And obviously, you know, we're hoping that as the industry progresses, more patients can avail themselves of the product. I think it's just probably worth making one point about medicinal cannabis. There are lots of misconceptions out there in the market, and I think that the biggest misconception is that every single cannabis strain gets you stoned or gets you high. That's not actually the case. The strain of cannabis that has that effect, THC, can be removed from the plant. So many patients are accessing low THC products, and you know, they don't have any sort of stoned or high effects at all. And that's why we see a lot of young people and also elderly people having great success with these products.
Tell us, where is Australia compared to the rest of the world in relation to this space?
It's a good question. I think there's a perception that Australia is quite progressive when it comes to medicinal cannabis, and in relation to other countries that have legalised its use, we're pretty far behind. You know, the leading countries for medicinal cannabis usage are Canada and the United States. Israel has made a lot of progress, and also some countries in South America. So, as I said before, there's a really small number of patients that have accessed medicinal cannabis locally. The costs are prohibitive. The bureaucracy is complicated. And as an industry, what we're trying to do is to make that process easier. And the intersection between consumption of the product and the law is really interesting. And the law really hasn't caught up. So what we're seeing is that people are being arrested for obtaining cannabis products to give to their sick children or their elderly parents. And there's a view that that's just not right, but the law hasn't yet caught up to that. So hopefully we'll see some change on that front.
How far away do you think that will?
Look, there's a big push by patient advocates and also by industry groups, and Cronos Australia is part of the broader industry group to make cannabis, medicinal cannabis, more affordable and to streamline legislation and processes to actually enable patients to alleviate their suffering. And that's what we're all about. I mean, medicinal cannabis, it's not a cure-all, it's not a fix-all, but it's been shown to help with pain, with illness, with nausea, with lots of cancer-related suffering, unfortunately. And I'm hoping within the next 2 or 3 years we see a streamlining of the processes so that more patients can access the product.
Yeah. So the issue of legalising cannabis, both for medicinal and recreational use, is a contentious topic, as you said.
Sure.
What's your views on it?
It's a really good question, and you know, I should note that, you know, in answering the question, I'll speak for myself, not for my employer. That's not to say that you know, my employer has a different view from me, but you know, Cronos Australia is focused solely on the medicinal space, and of, you know, providing products to patients for medicinal use. In terms of legalisation for rec use, and what that means is that it's no longer a criminal offence to use cannabis recreationally. You know, we've seen Canada legalised rec use, a number of states within America, a number of South American countries. New Zealand's looking to have a referendum to do the same next year. And I think when you look at a number of factors, from my perspective, it's the obvious path to take. I think history has shown us that the war on drugs or on cannabis itself has just failed. Last year there were 70,000 related cannabis arrests in Australia. And so if deterrence is the goal with the laws, it's not working. And so once you legalise cannabis, you're able to tax it, you're able to regulate it, you're able to assure a certain level of quality. And I think it's probably only a matter of time before we see a push for that to happen in Australia. It wasn't an issue at the most recent federal election, but I think if the referendum passes in New Zealand, it'll be something that'll come up within the next, say, 5 to 7 years here.
Now I'm curious, what made you change from Seek, a job posting board, to a startup company in medicinal cannabis?
It's a good question. I get that question a lot, particularly from concerned relatives. It's funny, since I've moved into the medicinal cannabis space, I'm on the receiving end of a lot of gags, cannabis-related gags, like are there munchies in the office, and, am I looking forward to joint ventures and things like that. So I think that's par for the course. But Seek, obviously a wonderful company, and I had a great experience working there for 7 years. But to be part of a new industry that really has the ability to change people's lives for the better, to help people who are suffering, and to really change health and nutrition as we know it, that was really exciting for me. And having worked at a long and a prosperous company, with huge number of employees and great infrastructure for a long time, I was excited by the opportunity of trying something new in a sort of a small startup space.
What are some of the skills you've had to learn or get on top of with the transition?
Look, there's a really complex legislative framework around medicinal cannabis in Australia, federally and also at a state level. So that's complicated. There's a lot of skilling up to do with that. In my new role at Cronos, I'm also the company secretary, which is new for me. So in terms of governance and compliance, I've had to skill up a fair bit there, and that's actually been an eye-opening experience and one that I've really enjoyed. And I note that I have had experience sitting as a non-executive director on a board of a not-for-profit, eFocus, and I think for aspiring general counsel and for lawyers generally, that experience of sitting around a board table is a great one, and I really encourage people who are interested in those opportunities to take them up if they come along, because I've really found that that's helped me day to day.
From your experiences, what are the differences working between, I suppose, a big company like Seek compared to the startup? What have you found to be different?
Yeah, I came from Seek with a legal team of five or six, and a separate, distinct corporate governance function. So, you've got a lot of support, you've got a lot of processes and structures in place to help you do your job, and that's good. When you're working on big M&A deals and you're working on discrete areas of law, it's great to have a team around you that can support you and that has sort of niche areas of expertise. Now at Cronos Australia, I'm employee number 4, and we have 5 employees altogether. So I am the sole legal and governance function. I've obviously got a lot of autonomy and discretion as to how I go about my day-to-day job, which I enjoy. But by the same token, I've really got to be across everything. There's no one to delegate to. And I'm responsible ultimately for the direction that the company takes in terms of its legal framework. It's exciting and it's challenging, but it comes obviously with a lack of a support infrastructure that I'm used to. But who knows? Hopefully, in time, we may be able to grow the team.
How did you overcome those challenges at the beginning?
Well, I have had experience working for a startup before. I worked for about 18 months at Luxury Escapes, an e-commerce business, and I had a great time working there. So I wasn't new to the prospect of working by myself. And I suppose I was able to take my experience, both from private practice and in-house, and bring them to the fore and do what I could to, maximise my strengths, and also, utilise external services and service providers, to help me in areas that I didn't feel it was time efficient to be focusing on.
Tell me more about your experience at Seek, being the Chief Legal Counsel there.
Look, Seek is, it's an absolutely wonderful company, and it's a fantastic place to work. And, in the broader market, I think a lot of people sort of refer to the Seek culture as being like a Google culture in Australia, and they're right. A fantastic focus on engaging staff and putting staff at the forefront. And, I know, Louise, you've chatted to a number of people about leadership and about corporate culture, and, I think Seek does it the best. And the focus is on really putting people first and making sure that they're happy and they're comfortable in their roles. And what that leads to is happier staff and less turnover and better business practices. So that was certainly my experience at Seek. I made lots of friends at Seek, and I think it's really important to enjoy the company of the people you work with. You're at work, for more hours than you're at home with your family. And so working in a fun environment, from my perspective, really adds to a business. And so that's something that we're also looking to create at Cronos as well.
And you've also worked at both private practice and in-house companies. Tell us your experiences and differences between the both, and especially for other lawyers considering both options. What would you say?
Yeah, I mean, that's a really topical subject, isn't it? I started my career at Arnold Block Leibler, and I worked for 7 years in private practice in their M&A team, and with a bit of banking and finance as well. Look, I often get asked by younger lawyers or more junior lawyers who are considering staying or leaving private practice what my views are. I don't know, I might be a bit different. I think that there's something really strong about developing a good grounding as a lawyer in private practice. When people tell me that they're not sure about staying or leaving, I generally tend to encourage people to stay in private practice, especially if you've got sophisticated and high quality work. I've got no doubt that's the best training you can get as a lawyer. So for those people out there who aren't sure, I tend to suggest that they give it a bit more time. But look, there are lots of people who, can't stand billable hours and who want a more commercial, high-level experience of working across a business and with a number of stakeholders. And for those people, I think in-house is a fantastic opportunity to leverage your legal skills, but also have a bit of that commercial exposure.
How long would you say to stay into private practice before making that jump to in-house?
Yeah, look, I think as a rule of thumb, people tend to say, you're best placed to get a relatively senior in-house role if you say a senior associate. And I think certainly from my experience, you're very green in your first year or two as a private practice lawyer. I mean, you don't really know that much. And if you've got rotations, as a number of firms do, it's hard to specialise. So I would say as a minimum, it's hard to make up your mind until you're 3 or 4 years in. But, by the same token, touching back on what I said before, it's really important to enjoy coming to work every day, to have good interaction with staff, to have good interaction with colleagues. And I think that's a factor. And if you're not getting that in private practice, and I think firms are getting better at dealing with staff and their needs, but if you're not getting that, then that might be an opportunity to look elsewhere. But that being said, I think a lot of people tend to look to go straight from private practice into in-house if they're not happy in private practice. I think it's also an option to consider other firms that might be better suited to what it is that you're trying to get professionally.
Now, we speak to so many lawyers, and there's this belief that going into in-house is going to be a little bit easier. It's going to be 9 to 5. It's less stressful. Would you say that's the case, or do you come from a different point of view?
Yeah, I would say that that's the case. I think that the work-life balance for an in-house lawyer generally is better. As a service provider in private practice, let's be honest, you're usually a slave to the client. If the client wants to meet or chat at a particular time or has a particular deadline, it's your responsibility to meet that. Certainly, I've worked very hard over periods of my life in-house and on weekends and on holidays and at all hours of the night. But by the same token, I've got a lot more flexibility to manage my time. And that's really important. And I think now that I've got some young kids, I really value being able to go to creche concerts and do the occasional pick up or drop off and be able to work my time accordingly. So I think it is a factor. I think there are a few in-house lawyers who are a bit antsy about the perception that we don't work as hard, or that our hours are very flexible. And certainly I know a lot of general counsel who work as hard as partners of law firms. But one of the advantages of being in-house, certainly that I've found, is that you've got a lot more destiny to manage your time as you wish.
Now, in terms of, I suppose, working in law and working in a startup can be quite stressful and fast-paced. What do you do outside of work to find balance, to keep happiness, and how does that benefit you from a professional point of view?
Well, on the theme of balance, most of my free time away from my wife and my kids, I like to spend in a Bikram yoga studio. So I don't know how familiar you are with Bikram, but it's a yoga class in 40-degree heat. So I'm working on my balance, I suppose, literally and metaphorically in that sense, and that's something that I've done for 8 years. So I'm a bit of a Bikram groupie. I think it's fair to say, and I try and go as often as possible. Certainly, the physical environment of a hot room can really teach you to focus your attention, and who knows, maybe that's helped me professionally. But something that I do that has really helped me professionally is meditate. I know you've spoken to previous guests who have advocated meditation, as a regular practice for lawyers, and I can't speak highly enough of that. I think as lawyers, so often, we get given tasks or documents to review that we've done 100 times before, and sort of, it's only natural that we think, oh yeah, we've done this. How much attention do we really need to focus on it? But bringing the skills of meditation, which is effectively sort of a calmness of the mind and a presence, I think is really useful for lawyers. And bringing that attention and that presence to, say, a legal document for review is something that I think can only improve professional outcomes. So I really advocate meditation or any form of physical exercise, especially because unfortunately we've seen that there are high levels of stress and anxiety amongst lawyers. So I think that's something really good to practice.
With the meditation, how did you start?
It's a really good question. I started with an app called Headspace, and I did 10 minutes of meditation a day for 10 days, and that was guided. And now, on a good day, I might try and do half an hour of silent meditation. And believe it or not, I've been on quite a few silent meditation retreats. Where you don't talk for upwards of a week, and that's really challenging, but by the same token really rewarding. And I think one of the misconceptions about meditation is people think, oh, I'm a really stressed person, or I've got a really fast moving mind, therefore I can't do it, or I'm no good at it, so there's no point in me even trying. It's a bit like jogging. You can start at the basics, and you can improve and you can work at it and build your way up. So to those who have tried it and who aren't really sure if they should proceed, I really encourage them to, and I think it's a really good practice to do it.
And that's it. Another episode of Gatehouse Insights draws to an end. Thank you for watching, and thank you for sharing this video with your friends. And if you haven't already done so, please subscribe to the Gatehouse Legal Recruitment YouTube channel where you can see more.